Now, Sports Talk with Brodes. Here's Hunter Brody.
We are broadcasting live from the Manscaped Man Cave. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code BROD at manscaped.com. What is going on, everyone? Welcome to Sports Talk with Brodes. Friday was refreshing. Brodes, why was Friday refreshing? Great question. I will tell you now. Dave Dombrowski spoke to the media, and he sounded professional. There wasn't vomit coming out of his mouth like when John Middleton and Andy McPhail speaks, when Matt Klentak speaks. We had none of that nonsense. It sounded like a baseball person who had an idea on what he was going to do. I was blown away. And it's sad that we are here. It shouldn't be this surprising to hear somebody understand the game and have some sort of blueprint and some sort of idea on how to operate. It really shouldn't be. But that's what we have been put through for years and years and years and years and years with this franchise. So from that aspect, it was so solid. And he did say things that raised my eyebrows, and he also said things that got my juices flowing with excitement. If I can explain exactly how I feel, it's a mix of three emotions. I'm nervous, I'm excited, and I'm intrigued. And I know at the time of the Instant Reaction podcast, I didn't love it. I was not thrilled because personally, I would have went down a different avenue. I would have went with a younger, analytically driven guy like in LA, like in Minnesota, like in Tampa Bay. I would have went with the new era of baseball where you attack the analytics very heavily because that's the style of baseball that is trending. Okay, and that's the way I would approach it. Personally, I enjoy it. I know a lot of people don't. I know I'm in the outlier. I'm in the minority here, but I enjoy it so much that I want to be like those franchises. I want to be heavy numbers. You're going to get the exact opposite. And knowing that John Middleton put together this analytic team over the last handful of years, and knowing the resources that they tied to this number game and bringing in an old school guy in Dombrowski, how is the marriage going to work? How are they going to come together and use both? Now, he was asked about that. He was asked about a lot of things, and I can't wait to dive into it. First, we are broadcasting live from the Manscaped Man Cave. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code BROD at manscaped.com. Now, to clarify where I stand right now, my initial reaction was I didn't love it. I heard him speak, and now I'm sitting in this weird spot of, okay, it's not the worst hire, although I said that from the jump. Even when I stated I didn't love it, I was clearly aware that this is not the worst case scenario ever. He has a track record of winning. He has a track record of putting together teams, but he also leaves it in shambles, and it burns to the ground every time he makes that next step in his career. So that is definitely something to factor in. You are guaranteed a 2013 and 2018, that type of baseball again, eventually. Whenever this era is over, whenever this Dombrowski era is over, it will be left in shambles. Now, if you get to the playoffs, if you get to the World Series, is it all worth it for you? Well, it depends exactly how it's played out. That 1997 World Series that they won, they didn't have winning seasons. It's not like they were constantly winning 100 games. No. They creeped up and they showed that they were taking steps, but until they won that World Series, it wasn't as if they were this dominating force that came up. If you want to use the Miami Marlins situation to defend Dombrowski, you can. Because he was informed at the end to blow it up. He was told, hey, we're not spending this much money. You got to go in another direction. So he was almost informed by ownership, you have to do this. That's fair. That is definitely fair to point out. But there's plenty of other spots that turned into one hell of a messy situation when he departed, whether that was Boston, whether that was Detroit. Detroit's still trying to figure its way out of some damn issues. So a lot to dissect with this guy, and that's why my emotions are all over the map, because it's clearly an upgrade. He's a respected guy. You read a lot of reports from the best to do it in the business, whether it's Jason Starr, Ken Rosenthal, the top guys in the business, and they look at this as you got yourself a proven commodity. You got yourself a guy that has been around, he's experienced, and they're confused with the backlash. And I think the confusion is, where you look at this team now, you need to retool. You need to somewhat take a mini step back. I'm not talking about a monstrous step back to the point where you sign Bryce Harper and then you tell Bryce, hey, we're going to rebuild and start over what we did with Matt Klentak in year one. It doesn't have to be to that degree, but you got to get a bit going in the farm system. You got to reshape this thing up a bit that will help you spring forward faster. That's how I would look at this. And when you look at the history of Dave Dombrowski, well, there's a lot of times where he gets somewhere and he has a lot of ingredients and boom, he starts firing off and trying his best to go at it, attack right now. In Detroit, though, he built that thing up. There's no doubt about it that he went in there with this nonsense organization and he said, I got this. And he started. And he attacked and he grinded. And he eventually got that team from the ground to where he ultimately wanted to be. So he does have a lot. When you look at the full package of him, there's a lot involved. Greatness, ugliness, bad contracts, good trades, a lot of prospects gone, leaving farm systems in the dust. So there's so much that you can grab onto and really put the magnifying glass on. Here's what I do know. He mentioned the retool in the presser. And to me, that was big. My biggest concern at the time of hearing the news was this team is not where they think they are. They believe internally that they are so close, that they need to bring a guy in here to get them over the hump with making these big signings, spending all this money, screw the system, let's go attack. We got to find a way to buy ourselves over the Braves. That's what I was afraid of with John Middleton and the way that he viewed this team. But hearing Dombrowski state that this is going to be more of a retool, that's what made me breathe easier. That's what made me realize, hold on a second, maybe they do realize where they are. Maybe they can see that, yes, we have pieces. We have Nola, we have Wheeler, we have Bryce Harper, we have Bohm, we have guys that can help be a part of this thing, right? We have guys that can be the foundation eventually of a team that can compete at a high level in playoff type moments. But we're not there yet. And it's almost as if they acknowledge that this is an assessment year. What do we have? What can we get? What can we draft? Who can we develop? What type of prospects are people interested in if we are going to make a trade? Because let's not act as if that's not something that goes through the brain of Dombrowski. And I know I brought this up before, but it bothers me. It bothers me that people think that if you're interested and if you value the prospects and if you value your minor leagues, then you're a joke, because that's not what it's about. Your minor league starts it all. Your prospects start it all. You want to talk about that 08 team, 09, even 2007, the excitement with that? Where do you think these guys came from? Where do you think the Houston Astros came from? Yes, the banging on the trash cans and them cheating, it pissed me off like no other. But you got to build within. You need to value that. You need to have a scouting team and a developmental team that can constantly replenish your system over and over and over again. So then when you do trade guys, you have plenty more in stock. You need help from these players. Hell, look at the money situation. You know the owner is very unwilling to go over the luxury tax. Well, how is it easier to stay under the luxury tax? Getting prospects that eventually bloom into something, that grow into a player, so then when you talk about their cost and the efficiency of their price tag and how they play, it allows you to go spend in other areas. There's so many reasons why prospects should not be overlooked. Do you know how many times I heard, well, should Dave Dombrowski really care about, or should he care so much about where the AA team finishes, where the AAA team finishes? No, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm not claiming that it matters where the Iron Pigs are in the middle of September. That's the last thing on my mind. But if you want to look at the luxury tax, if you want to look at cost-efficient players, it's all about starting a base. You have to have a base. So prospects do matter. That's the start. If you want to do this thing the right way, that's where it begins. So that's my thought process on it. And when you hear him mention the word retool, it was something that allowed me to step back and almost go, which was a deep breath, by the way, if you couldn't tell what that was. That needed to be the case. That needed to be the way that this franchise went because there's so much with this squad. You are stuck in this area of you're not losing 100 games, but you're also not winning 90. What do you do and how do you make that next step that will constantly put you in a mode to compete for the division? Now, you ended up having the New York Mets sign James McCann. $40 million, 4 years. So what does that mean for JT Realmuto? Well, he, of course, was asked about JT Realmuto, and he said there was the flexibility to do it. And everybody in the organization wants him back. And, of course, we know it's going to come down to a financial decision, and is he going to be worth X amount of money for X amount of years at his age? James McCann getting signed by the Mets, it takes the Mets out of play, which is huge. They're probably going to add George Springer as well, which scares the living hell out of me. But I wonder if that price tag for James McCann, is that going to bring JT Realmuto's money down? And I think so. I think that money totally hurt the market for JT. Now, it only takes one team. That's the thing. If you have 7 teams valuing one player at a certain price tag, and there's one team going, I don't give a damn what you guys think, I'm going to step in and offer this, well, then there you go. So it really only takes one team to mess up the flow of the market. It seems maybe JT at this point holds out. He's really going to push it and really, really pray that eventually one team steps up and gives him more money and a lot of money like he was asking for originally. I don't anticipate that happening. I think JT right now is shaking in his boots, realizing, damn, I'm probably not going to get what I expected. Now, this move would naturally push the Phillies back in the mix a little bit more, if you will. He was a big-time conversation with the New York market. That was a hot topic surrounding the baseball world. Will JT Realmuto go to the Mets? That's a big contender out. Now, you do need to realize the Angels and the Mets were both going back and forth. Who's going to land him? Are the Angels willing to go out and sign JT, package him up with Mike Trout, Anthony Rendon? I don't think they're walking around like Steve Cohen is, though, saying, I'm going to go, baby. I'm going to go attack these free agents. And if JT wants significantly more money, I don't know if the Angels have that available, but I do know that JT's situation just got more interesting. I'm not spending a lot of money on him. It would be the wrong decision. I know what you gave up in Sixto Sanchez. I know everybody's saying, sign JT. It's not the right move to sign JT for a big-time price. If it's reasonable, if it's 4 or 5 years, if the money isn't crushing, then I can live with it. But if you're going to retool and reassess this thing, would it make sense to sign JT? If JT's best years moving forward are the next 2 or 3 seasons, and then he's somewhat average after that, well, let's be realistic. If you look at this franchise, let's say you're not going to get winning baseball. When I say winning baseball, I'm talking over 500 baseball until the next 2 seasons. So let's put us at 2022, 2023. If that's when, because it's going to take a couple years. This doesn't just happen with the snap of your fingers, a retooling process. So let's say 2-3 years down the road is when Dombrowski puts this team and this franchise in position to compete every single year. Well, at that point, JT Realmuto is 33 years old, and now you have the back end of his career on a $20 million cap hit. Like, that doesn't, well, not cap hit, but, with the luxury tax, that doesn't make sense to me. So if you have your timeline out there, signing JT to this big deal, it doesn't make any sense for the window of when you think this team is going to be at a legitimate time to compete, at a legitimate spot to compete. I don't want him at age 34, 35, 36 years old being paid $20 million. Sorry. I'd rather split that up throughout other pieces. You have Jake Arrieta's money coming off the books. You have other money in other spots. You have JT Realmuto's contract that you would have paid him. You got money playing around there. Go build this team. in other areas. You need a new full bullpen. You need a starting pitcher. You need a lot. And speaking of starting pitching, he talked about the power arms. He believes in the power arms. I'm like, oh, here we go, baby. No more Cole Irvins with that 68-mile-per-hour fastball. I'm done with that. No more Cole Irvins. Now, to be fair, Vince Velasquez throws hard. Nick Pivetta throws hard, and they both stink. They're both garbage. So it's not all about having power arms. You got to know how to operate with that power arm, and that's fine. But I love the fact that his mindset is, we got to go get some guys who can gas it up. Zach Wheeler can throw it. You know what I mean? So I love the fact that that's the philosophy. And on top of that, he even mentioned Mick Abel, who was their first-round draft pick. Now, I'm not claiming that means he's anytime close to being ready to perform, because he's definitely not. But he sees something in Mick Abel. You can see that one of two ways. One, you either think, okay, hold on, that's a prospect that he'd be intrigued by eventually down the road, or two, he'd be intrigued to sell that prospect and move on from him to acquire other talent. As much as I roast the guy for not having a system when he leaves places, when you look at that Boston Red Sox team, it's not as if he got rid of anybody. Devers, Benintendi, I mean, there's so many names that he did stick with. If he recognizes the talent is there to help your major league team, he's just not going to move on from them just because they're a prospect. For example, Alec Boehm is that guy. That's how I feel compares best to what he saw in Boston with some of those players that were key pieces to their crazy run in 2018. He would look at Boehm the same way he looked at Benintendi or Rafael Devers, players like that. I do wonder where Spencer Howard falls into place, though, because he is a power arm. He can throw heavy. He can throw in that high 90 area, the fastball, right? But when I watch the kid play, and I know it's an early assessment, I think he's missing something. And only time will tell. Maybe I'm wrong. I want to be wrong. We'll see how this thing gets built, though. I wonder what Spencer Howard is going to be like next season. And I wonder if he's a guy that you can see possibly getting moved. You do know that Dave Dombrowski loves that number one ace. He loves that guy. Does that mean Trevor Bauer's in the mix? Well, I really doubt it. But we do know that he has a history of falling in love with that guy. Chris Sale, that guy. He loves that guy when it comes to starting pitching. Now, maybe he thinks the Phillies have that. Interesting I say that, because he mentioned 3 pitchers. And that's why I brought up Spencer Howard, because he mentioned 3 pitchers. Aaron Nola, Zach Wheeler, Zach Eflin. Now, Zach Eflin, to me, I like him. I like him as a 4 or 5 guy. I don't like him as a top 3 guy. He's showing improvement. His strikeouts per 9 has clearly jumped. He has shown success. And remember, there was a year, 2 years ago? Was it last year? So many damn baseball games, I forget exactly what year it was. But he listened to the coaching staff, and then he said, you know what, screw this. I'm done with this up in the zone garbage. I'm going to pitch the way that I pitch. And then he turned out becoming solid again. It was almost as if he changed his pitching and his philosophy with how he attacked the strike zone to fit the coaching staff. And then he realized, look, this is garbage for me. I'm going back to who I am. I'm going to use my pitches, and I'm going to attack the lower part of the zone again. And that's where he became the better version of Zach Eflin. So ever since then, it was a clear path of being a better version of himself. I'm not ready to put him in the category, though, of top 3. You're not in a great position if Zach Eflin is your 3rd. What does that mean? Does that mean Nola, Wheeler, Eflin, Howard, Velasquez? And I know, essentially, if this is a retooling year, it's a punt year. So if that's the philosophy they're going with, well, then you might have to accept that for this season to see what you have. So then you can make the corresponding moves in the offseason. So I'm the one sitting here saying you might have to take a step back to spring forward faster. Well, you might have to live with that type of starting rotation if that's the mindset. And I do believe it's the right mindset, so I guess I am going to have to live with it. But in terms of Eflin, I'm thinking more big picture. If we're looking big picture and not necessarily just for next season, if Zach Eflin's your number 3, I don't know. I mean, I don't see it to that level. I like him. I think he keeps the pitch count low, especially in this era of baseball where he can throw complete games, and that's because he's not afraid of contact. You're not afraid to get contact, that means, well, your pitch count's going to be lower because you're going to allow some of those guys to put it in play. That's when you trust your stuff. You don't need to worry about it. All right, what else you don't need to worry about is DraftKings. Why is that? Well, because they brought their expertise to legal sports betting. It's a legitimate sports book based right here in the U.S., so you can rest assured that your funds are totally secure. DraftKings, America's top-rated sportsbook app, is safe, secure, and reliable. Deposit and withdraw at your convenience. Listen to this deal. It's outrageous. All new users have a chance to earn a sign-up bonus up to $1,000 when signing up. Sign up now. Use the promo code BRODES. Head to the app, check out all that they have to offer, including player props, live betting, and so much more. If sportsbooks are not yet available in your state, don't forget about the DraftKings Fantasy app, which offers millions of dollars in total prizes every single week. And if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, crisis counseling and referral services can be accessed by calling 1-800-GAMBLER. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. This is the one spot where I feel the most confused on how it's going to go down. Mixing analytics and mixing scouting. Because there's no doubt about it that Dave Dombrowski is an old school guy. Gut feel, eye test. But you just spent how many years with Matt Klentak bringing in all this information, grabbing all the data, crunching numbers? You just did that for so many years. You can't just throw that away, and you shouldn't. You shouldn't. I know there's probably anti-new school baseball people going, who cares about the number? Back in my day. And no. You need numbers, all right? The LA Dodgers, they spent a lot of money on a lot of great players, but they also use so many analytics. I know people like to rip the Tampa Bay Rays for what they did, but look at their payroll. Look at how far they got. Look. Numbers help. Numbers are extremely beneficial. Now, it's not the only way to win. You don't need to use it like the Bible, just like the Tampa Bay Rays did. It doesn't have to be to that extreme. You can merge the two together. I'm just wondering, how is it going to look and how is it going to play out? He's going to have autonomy. He's going to be able to make the decisions. He's pulling all the strings. He's going to value gut feel, eye test way more than the numbers. That's just who he is. That's just how he rolls. And that's why I had some pushback on it, because I wanted to go in the direction of where baseball is. I wanted to go down the road of numbers. And I know Matt Klentak didn't work, but that doesn't mean the numbers and the analytical approach doesn't work because he screwed it up. There's plenty of guys around the league that are succeeding at a high rate using a similar style. You just had the wrong person in place. So just because Matt Klentak failed and he was a younger, analytically driven guy, that means the mentality of going in that way is automatically a failure, because that's just not the case. You can look around the league at all these teams that are doing it, and they're getting the job done to a degree, at least being involved way more than the Phillies have been in so many damn years. So I want to see, how do they come together and pull the scouting / eye test with the numbers, because something tells me they're going to go really with that old school mind instead of the numbers, and that is where I talk about the three emotions that I have entering the season and entering this new regime. Part of the concern side of things is, look, I don't know if going off eye test is the best way to handle things. How do you mix the two? You need to mix the two, and he was aware of that. And he said, look, we will use numbers as well. All data is great data, but that could also be a bunch of crap. That could be president speak, if you will. Yeah, we'll use the numbers. Because he knew he was going to be asked that question, and he had time to prepare. That's why I'm always baffled when the pressures are so ugly. They know what's coming. Middleton, McPhail, they know what questions are going to be asked. They have a PR team for a reason. So when they fall flat on their face, it's crazy to me. You knew this was going to be the way. You knew these answers or these questions were going to be asked, and you would need to have an answer. So how are you that unprepared? To me, with that question of, I like analytics, I think we can use that information, that sounded like a guy who was prepared for the question, who doesn't really agree with his answer, but he's going to make it sound good, and he's probably going to go more with the way he sees it and with the way that he feels with the scouting and more of his background. That's what he's going to apply to this front office, and I don't know if that's necessarily the greatest idea in the world. But hey, look, I mean, he has had a history of doing great things. He has a history of doing very, very bad things as well. So it is a weird spot to be in. But if you ask me now, Brodes, how do you feel about things compared to the initial reaction? I feel better. I do feel better. I did think that my instant reaction to it all was aggressive. But once again, that's because I wanted to have John Middleton adapt. I wanted John Middleton to go full on, this is 2020 baseball. I'm ready to dive into the 2020 world. And he didn't necessarily do that. And I wonder with Thad going back to Minnesota, with Burns going to the Dodgers, with Michael Hill still being available, with all these guys who interviewed for the job going back to their other spots, is there a reason why that was? And he did mention, Dombrowski did mention that the timeline for the whole Nashville thing was longer than expected. So if you didn't know, he was working together with baseball in Nashville and trying to start something up there, getting a team going, and maybe that had something to do with it. And I just wonder, because he's going to have autonomy. Scott Lauber reported this months ago. If Dombrowski gets the job, he's going to have autonomy. He's going to be the one that pulls everything. He's going to be the one choosing every decision. So did John Middleton give the other interviewees that same chance? Did he look at Thad and go, you're going to have autonomy? Did he look at Burns and say, you're going to have autonomy? My guess is no. But for some reason, he was willing to do that with Dombrowski. Well, maybe it has to do with the track record and showing success. But he does have success. I'm just conflicted on how to feel, because there are miserable moments throughout his processes, throughout his process. I guess it's processes because he's done it in multiple different locations. There's been some flaws involved too. And no one's perfect. I'm not claiming anyone needs to be perfect. But this isn't your typical 2020 hire. This is an old school hire. And that's where I'm going back and forth in my brain on how to really analyze this. But once again, I do feel better today after hearing him speak. It felt like a professional was in the room. It felt like someone who was a baseball mind was actually speaking and answering questions. And I'm done with John Middleton and Andy MacPhail speaking. I wonder what this means for MacPhail. He was willing to step aside. He said, if we land a big fish, I'm out of here. So he was probably picking up the phone secretly going, yeah. Hey, Dave, you want to come here? Because he probably wants to be gone. And Matt Klentak's still involved. He didn't get fired. He got reassigned. Well, what's the deal with Matt Klentak? How much input is he going to have? He was mentioned. He said, look, I still got to meet some people. I still got to talk to some people. We still got a lot to learn from the front office side of things. But Matt Klentak's name was brought up. And I'm thinking about what are they going to do in the GM chair. Someone who works together. It's sort of like Daryl Morey, Elton Brand. Daryl Morey is calling all the shots, but Elton Brand has an impact on what happens. They communicate. They work together. It's going to be the same here, but I wonder if he's even going to have a GM or if he's just going to say, look, this is my show. I like Michael Hill, but I don't see that being a legitimate choice at this point, because I'm sure he wants to have more of a say. He's going to want to have his fingerprints on a lot more of the moves than he would here under Dombrowski. This definitely does, though, make the season more entertaining. I was down in the dumps for this upcoming season. I had no excitement whatsoever. It was all taken out of me. It was sucked out of me. I knew it would be somewhat boring, and you just had no direction with the team. Now, there seems to be some sort of direction in terms of let's retool, and I'm excited to see what this retooling process is. What happens with Gene Segura? Can you move on from Gene Segura and then sign Didi Gregorius? I heard Matt Breen, he was speaking, and he mentioned possibly moving on from Scott Kingery. You need to upgrade that second base role, and Scott Kingery is someone who brings versatility defensively. He can play a bunch of different positions. Maybe there's a team out there looking for a Scott Kingery where you can upgrade your everyday second base play. I told you this from the jump. I'm not big on Scott Kingery. I don't think that this kid is anything special. I think he's an okay bench player who can give you days at certain positions, which is nice. It's valuable to have that, but it's not legit winning type player. You can do better than that. How are you going to upgrade this thing? Alec Boehm, I love the kid to death. He can't defend. Can you legitimately play at a high level with Alec Boehm playing at third base? I just feel like there's so many issues, and I'm not knocking the kid. I'm excited for the kid. I want him to be here, but with Rhys Hoskins at first base, what do you do with Alec Boehm? And once again, you still don't know what's happening with the DH spot in the National League, which opens the door for so many more questions. I don't know where they're going to go, but knowing that there's a baseball guy in place, it's a lot better than going through the winter meetings and going through this season with an interim GM in Ned Rice. The guy is in place. Is the guy the right guy? Only time is going to tell. You can do a lot worse. It is not the worst hire in the world. I think it's reasonable, though, to question how does this marriage work together? How do you take new school and old school and have a good marriage where you can use both assets to put a great product on the field? You see this guy work with a farm system. Well, this team doesn't have a farm system. So how do you build that and then have him use it to his advantage? He has done great things when there has been ingredients. He doesn't have the ingredients. And Detroit is an example on where he built it up from scratch and he got to 2 World Series. And he had success with those Tiger teams. I think that's the best way to look at this. If he can do what he did in Detroit and apply that to Philadelphia, you're talking about a reasonable stretch. It might get ugly at the end, but if you're willing to take that reasonable stretch for dumpster fire baseball afterwards, then you have the guy. I don't think it needs to be that way, though, and that's also why I criticize this move. I don't think it has to be you get a guy in here, you go all in, you get a nice run, and then you have to blow it up. With how baseball is now operated and how numbers have been involved in the game, you can find ways to have sustained success. Look at the Dodgers, all right? They just spend, they have numbers, they get good guys, they draft players, they develop players, and they're constantly winning their division over and over and over again. They're not blowing up. And to be fair, they have went on a big streak of not being able to win the World Series. They finally cracked it, but they've had sustained success for a long period of time. It doesn't need to be, the only option doesn't have to be go for a little bit of time, have a nice run, and then start all over. You can find ways to naturally build a franchise where it's turnover after turnover after turnover, but that turnover is still resulting in winning baseball games and being involved. It doesn't have to end in a scenario where you got to blow things up, you can't sign certain players because you gave a bunch of guys money that they were overpaid and you have no prospects and you go through 100-loss seasons. That's his philosophy. That's where it ends at the end of the day. But if you're willing to have that for a stretch of a little bit of time of success, then this is your guy. But it doesn't have to be that way. I would have tried to find someone who can come in here and build it for a significant amount of time without having to have that downfall. And that's the way I would have went. But it doesn't mean you're in the worst spot ever. I guess the positive here is you're going to be involved. It might take a couple seasons, 1 or 2 years to build this thing up to Dave Dombrowski's standards to start the flow of things. So it's not going to happen instantly. You're talking 1 or 2 years to really get his feet molded in Philadelphia with this franchise. There's so much to do. So it might take a little bit of time. But I do think eventually you're going to have a product on the field that is super exciting again. I do. I do believe that. So I'm more calm now. I'm more interested by it. I'm more intrigued by it, but there's also nerves. There's a lot of conflicting feelings. And we'll see how it plays out. You know, this just screams John Middleton, though. This is a standard John Middleton signing. I need to let you know about Orbit Energy and Power, by the way. With over 20 years of experience in the solar industry, they are home to your solar experts in residential and commercial projects. They are dedicated to making sure your project is completed easily and properly by using high-quality materials and trained professionals to get the job done right. They eliminate your electric bill completely by offering flexible financing solutions such as $0 down. They also provide water purification systems, backup energy services, battery storage, and more. So check out their information. It's all down below. Thank you all so much for listening, and I will see you next time.